Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of TLR Tuesdays. I'm Lee Parsley, president of Texans for Lawsuit Reform. I'm joined, as always, by Mary Tipps, our executive director, and we're here to talk about what's going on around the Capitol. But today, like an old married couple, we're switching things up, and I'm going first. Good morning, Mary.
Morning, Lee.
How are you doing?
I'm good. It's just another day at the session.
Another day in paradise. I want to talk this morning about citizen action. And I specifically want to put that in the context of the Lone Star Economic Alliance that you've been working a lot on for a while.
And it is my favorite topic.
Good. So tell us how things are going with LSEA and how that plays into what we're doing at the Capitol.
Well, the Lone Star Economic Alliance has over 1,150 members, I think 1,151 to be exact. They are writing letters, they are making calls, they're walking the halls. We had the committee hearing. We had 67 people show up at 8 a.m. when we thought the bill was going to be heard first. Well, the bill was heard last, but we still had 36 people from all over the state stay with us all day to get their voices heard.
Yeah, they came early, they stayed late, and just to make sure our listeners know, you're talking about the hearing on Senate Bill 30 in the Senate State Affairs Committee.
Yes. And we had asked them to be here at 8 because we thought it was going to happen then, and it didn't actually happen until noon, until 2, and then we went back in at 6:30, and those who could stayed. We heard stories from business owners that talked about their capital decisions based on the litigation environment. We heard from people like Pam Grooms and Samantha Sizemore. Pam does sand. Samantha has a logging company. It's her family company. They told their story, and it resonated with the committee. And in fact, both of those two women were recognized in a Forbes article about the hearing later in the week, and they were blown away.
Yeah, I agree. It really went well, and the breadth of the witnesses that LSEA produced was really outstanding. And just like you said, we had two witnesses that are with Fortune 150 companies, I think they both said. And so, in other words, big
companies. Significant.
Right, and they're saying that the litigation environment in Texas is so challenging, among the worst in the United States at this point, that they're beginning to make decisions about how they allocate capital, whether they buy here, whether they expand here, based on the tort environment. And those decisions are not favoring Texas today. So that's itself was meaningful testimony. And then you go to the other end of the business spectrum, and you had a whole group of people who are mom and pops, as they say.
Real Texans.
Real Texans.
Not that the others aren't, but you know what I mean.
Right, running small businesses. And they, I think, tell me again, our person with logging company.
Samantha Sizemore.
You know, she said that this is not just a problem. It is crippling for her when her insurance rates double because of litigation. And
Pam talked about the fact that they can't expand their operations as well because the litigation, their insurance is exorbitant.
Right. And I think she said they're losing 5 haulers of their frac sand every year because the little operators just can't afford to stay in business right now.
Absolutely.
And so that's what Senate Bill 30 is about. That's what we're trying to deal with in Senate Bill 30.
Yep. And at the end of the day, we had 114 cards of support and 39 against. I think their voices were heard.
Yeah, and it makes a difference, don't you think? The fact yeah. So there's a tool for people to be involved through LSEA. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, at the lseatx.com webpage, you can just simply click on a button and send a letter to your legislator and tell them what kind of problems you're having. And we have over 1,200 letters going into the Capitol already, and we're going to add to that on a daily basis.
And again, it makes a difference because the citizens talking to their legislators really informs the decisions that are made around the Capitol.
Yeah, and I've told them, if you see them at church, you see them at the grocery store, you're in line at Chick-fil-A, stop and tell them, I have a problem, help me.
Don't worry, folks out there. Our people at LSEA are very nice. If they see you at Chick-fil-A, they will politely say, we need your help.
Well, of course.
Of course.
I wouldn't expect anything different.
Exactly. So the other part that the hearing really focused on was medical billing in litigation. So there were quite a bit of testimony about that too.
Yep.
And I just want to make sure our viewers understand what Senate Bill 30 is about and what it's not about. But it's particularly about this idea that the plaintiff's attorneys will send folks to they're not in-house people, but they almost could be. They are chiropractors, pain management specialists, and some doctors. So it's not all plaintiff's attorneys. Neurosurgeons.
We heard from one of those.
It's not all healthcare providers, but there are some of each that are working together for the purpose of inflating medical bills. And that's what it is that's driving this litigation, is that they'll take a fender bender, then turn it into $300,000 worth of unpaid medical bills, and present that to a fracking sand hauling company as if those are legitimate damages for a 5-mile-an-hour rear-end collision. And that is really driving the litigation industry these days in Texas.
Well, then what about the woman that testified that she's an attorney, that there was a fender bender, one of her customers? There was one person in the truck. The police report says one person, and 3 weeks later, she gets a lawsuit for 4 people in the truck, all having the same medical expenses.
Right, all seeing the same healthcare providers, having the same diagnosis and the same medical expenses.
Yeah, the teenagers as well as the adults.
Well, it couldn't be true, right?
No.
Common sense tells us that even if there were 4 people in the pickup, they would at least have somewhat different injuries, but they were all treated by the same providers for the same injuries and have essentially the same medical bills, was the testimony.
And some would wonder if the F word applies here. Not that one. Fraud.
Fraud. That's good, Mary. I like that. So, yeah, and what's more, it's not just fraud. It's bad for the clients, in my opinion, and I think it's unethical. And let me tell you why. They will tell their clients, some of the lawyers who do this will tell their clients, don't use your health insurance. So you're insured, but they say don't use it. Go to our chiropractor, our doctor, and don't whip out your card. Why? Because they want the medical bills to build up. They want to control the medical treatment, as we heard in the testimony, and they want to have the largest number they can. But here's what happens. Let me finish this.
Yep.
Here's what happens. If you used your health insurance, let's say you've got a $2,500 deductible, so you have to meet that deductible. You're out of pocket $2,500. And then you're going to pay some copays when you go to legitimate doctors for legitimate treatment. And that may add up to a few $100s too. But your limit is going to be maybe a few $1,000s is how much you're out of pocket. That's not nothing for a lot of Texans, I get that.
No.
But it's within the realm of reasonable. But if you don't use your health insurance and you go through this process and you lose that lawsuit, you now potentially have medical bills of $300,000 that are unpaid that you're responsible for.
Well, and on top of that, medical bills that are exaggerated. They're not the same things, like you said, insurance. But if I go to a chiropractor, I pay $100. They're presenting chiropractor visits at $1,000. Everything is ramped up. It just is a guess of whatever they want to charge.
Right. Again, the testimony was pretty clear about that. The medical doctors bill many times what they would take every day in reimbursement from the health insurance industry. And then, as I said, they leave potentially, if the plaintiff doesn't prevail, they have an enormous unpaid medical bill, bankruptcy-style unpaid medical bills. And I think that is just not right to the clients of these lawyers who get them into this scheme, really for the purpose of maximizing the damages in a lawsuit, not for treating an actual injury.
Well, that and the other person that we talked to, that they had a $750,000 judgment, and they got $139 only because all of those medical expenses were taken out of their judgment. Medical expenses they didn't even need.
Right. That's another thing we heard about, medical expenses that the people often don't want. So that you're right, Mary. So that if the lawsuit is successful and the lawyer settles it and takes in a payment, then the lawyer is going to take, most of these lawyers I think right now are working at about a 40% contingency fee. So a $750,000 case, they take 40% off the top. Then they're going to pay the healthcare providers out of that settlement as well, however much they work out in the back room when they do that. And then they'll pay some other case-related expenses, and whatever's left goes to the plaintiff. And so it is literally true that the plaintiffs in these cases can get well below half, and maybe not even near that. And so, again, and if they lose the case, they potentially are on the hook for many thousands of dollars of unpaid medical bills. So the whole system needs to change, and I'm telling you, the legislature's doing the right thing with Senate Bill 30 to try to fix it.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about the future. LSEA still out there, still working.
Every day.
What's up next?
Well, we've got on Wednesday, it's going to be a tricky day, but we're good with that. Senate Bill 39 will be heard in Senate Transportation, and its counter bill will be heard in the Judiciary JCJ Committee, both on the same day. So we're going to be flopping back between the two with our witnesses.
So the other bill is House Bill 4688 by Chairman Jeff Leach. He was
you.
our special guest,
Yes.
I think, a week ago, and he talked about this bill. This is the revisions to the 2021 trucking bill. And so, yeah, both of them will be heard on the same day in the legislature, so we'll go from the east wing to the west wing and back and forth until both bills are heard. But I think your LSEA team, again, can use the letter writing tool.
Oh, yeah. We're sending out a daily updates, letting them know, asking them to write their members letters of encouragement to get these bills passed and to the governor.
And if they need anything, they can check in with us.
All they have to do is email me. I'm ready and willing and able and want to help.
And let me tell you to folks out there, Mary Tips is ready, willing, and able to help. She has done a great job with LSEA. It is a huge, huge movement, and it is meaningful at the Capitol. So great work, Mary, and great work to you folks out there who are helping us.
Like we say, you're legal, I'm people, and it's a good combo. Did you call us an old married couple?
Well, sort of.
Yes, I think you did.
That's another edition of TLR Tuesdays. Thanks for joining us.